Our next speaker is Hawkeye Clark. So Hawkeye was born in Portland and is a descendant of the native Lakota people. As a coyote shaman, he has walked the Red Road for nearly 20 years. On this path, Hawkeye has developed a practice of psychedelic shamanism, a fusion of science, native spirituality, and psychedelics plant medicines. His own intense journey with microdosing and mental health has led him towards psychedelic education. He's also just a really wonderful human being. I know him really well, and really easy to talk to, and an absolute just encyclopedia of information. And there he is. So, we could all please give a very warm welcome in this very warm tent to Hawkeye Clark!
Hello, Portland! Welcome to the psychedelic renaissance. I also like to say it's the psychedelic revolution starring you. Welcome to my presentation today on intentional microdosing beyond the molecule. And I'm calling it a guided path to a successful microdosing adventure. I'm a coyote shaman. I am surprised not at all. Okay, let's try this again. Why should you be listening to me? I am a Portland-born Native American shaman. I am a proud member of the Lakota people. I'm a coyote shaman. We're the trickster, and I have incorporated psychedelics into my shamanistic journey. And I've got a 30-year love affair with psychedelics. And in the last 3 years, I've delved very deeply into microdosing. So much so that I am now kind of an expert. I'm a very complex person. I am disabled physically. I've had arthritis for 38 years. I don't work. It gives me a lot of time to read and research. I also don't have a professional reputation to murder. I do that very well on my own. So I don't have to worry about that. It just gives me a lot of time to do what I do. Now, I have spent a large portion of my life in the pagan spiritual community, in various circles, from official Wiccan-type covens to the more native spiritual path. And I've run in the kink circles for the last 6 years. I've been part of a hook suspension crew in Portland here called Orbs. So there are many ways, what this brings me back to is there are many ways to achieve altered states of consciousness, and that's one of the things I've been fascinated all my life. And be it meditation, be it dance, be it psychedelics, be it ordeal path, there are lots of ways to get to that altered states of consciousness, and that's where I like to live. I identify as a modern primitive, as a follower of Fakir Mushafar. And I was at my wit's end about 3 years ago. I have mental illness. I live with bipolar and depression and anxiety. And I can tell you unequivocally, without microdosing, I would not be on this stage talking to you. That's how serious I am about it. Okay? I disliked the Western medicine treatment for mental illness, which are SSRIs and antidepressants and blah, 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 where the side effects are often so much worse than the actual feeling. And I went into this with I need to do this. So, in deeply getting into psychedelics, and microdosing in particular, I started talking to people and people asking me questions, and almost always, the reason I wrote this is people would be prepared and they would come to me and how do I microdose? And that struck me about a year ago, and when Tom and Eden approached me about this conference, it really sunk in. What do you do after you've got your dosage? What do you do when you have your molecule? What is next? And there's a lot of people who try microdosing with no plan at all, and it works great, but a lot of people don't. You need something beyond what you're taking and how you're taking it. I want to briefly talk on dosage and dosaging for most psychedelics, including LSD, the phenylethylamines, the mescaline. All of those are much more in the Dr. Fadiman protocol, which is dosing every 4 days, repeating. there are a lot of things that fall into the dosing schedule more like fungus. Things like iboga can be microdosed in a much more fungus constant every day. Orape is one of those. So those are the two main dosing schedules. But I mostly talk about fungus and I mostly talk about LSD because that is what most people get into the microdosing for. I started out on LSD, and at about 6, 8, 7, 8 months, I started tapering off. It's a great mainline medicine to keep one kind of even. Fungus I found much more effective for pulling people out of low places. So people kept asking me, how do I microdose? Okay, so once you have these doses and dosing schedules, what do you do? Well, first off, I'm a shaman. I consider all of these plant medicines, these are all sacred. These are all ours. There's nobody to tell us that these are not ours. These have been culturally used for generation across indigenous cultures all over the world. Don't you dare tell me they're illegal. All right? If you had not guessed, I'm kind of with Tom, out loud and proud with their psychedelic use. So I want to get into the first thing that is most important is intention. And people lack this. And I'm pulling this, those of you with the ritual sacred path are going to hear a lot of familiar terms in my program only because they cross circles so easily. So just with like ordeal path and meditation, you need an intention. And intentions are different than goals. In my case, as an example, a goal would be to get off of Western medicines for anxiety disorders or depression or blah, blah, blah. That is a goal. My intention was to get into microdosing to see if it worked for me and how I could use it and integrate it into my life to make me a more successful human. My teacher, Geronimo, told me something great about intention. Intention is open-ended. It allows you to have the experience and treat every step that you walk as purposeful. But a goal often enters in as a framework that restricts your experience. So intention is key in that it is open-ended and allows the experience to unfold. I love to relate intention to psychedelics because you never know what the trip you're going to get. You take the ticket, you take the ride, you get what you get, right? Intention is like that, walking with purpose. So that is the most important. There are other path stones on my path, but I cannot emphasize intention enough. Why are you microdosing? Take that pause. Why are you microdosing? Try to answer that with a intentional, planned statement that allows you to have the experience, positive or negative, that allows you to process the experience, positive or negative, in a matter that lets your witness experience and not necessarily let your body machine take over. So, next are two things that I have on are very personal that you can do on a microdosing path that you have direct control of. So I'm going to name them right after intention is important. One of them is a meditative practice, and I cannot emphasize the importance of a moment of stillness. I just did it before this presentation, a moment of stillness. Anything could be a meditative practice. Working out, dancing, exercise, yoga, straight up meditation, listening to music, quietly sitting in your yard. I work with a lot of disabled people whose meditative practice is moving their digits in a certain order that they get their exercise. So take that moment of stillness every day. You need to focus, center, and ground. Ritual ceremonial people get that, right? Okay. Next path stone I like to encourage in everyone is journaling. Now this is a great one I pulled from psychology and people who deal with working through experiences with macrodoses of psychedelics. But it's great in a psychology type setting. Journaling helps you keep a narrative going and down so it doesn't get lost in the ether. Be brutally honest with your journaling. Pretend you are the only one that's going to read it. Act like no one's going to read it but you. You can later decide to let somebody else read it, but be brutally honest and do it, especially on the days that you're microdosing. All right, so I also encourage, this I got from a counselor friend, to reread your journal entries often. It's like exposure therapy. It familiarizes with your experience throughout the process. And it also allows you to look at data points that you can carry forward to one of my later path stones, which is your personal appraisal. So in your journaling, be aware, note down your mental attitude, how you wake up in the day, especially days you microdose, how your mental attitude changes through the day. Note down any crises that come up, how you felt and adapted with the crises. Hopefully at the beginning, you see a much more reactionary state, and near the end of it, you get to a much more adaptive, compromise, overcome state. So any crises. How do you feel physically? Now, this is important with fungus microdosing because a lot of people are sensitive to fungus. And I start as low as 1/10 of a gram all the way up to 0.25 of a gram every day on fungus. But even at 0.25, some people can get a little nauseous. I recommend Zofran as a settling agent. It's a serotonin 3 inhibitor antagonist, so it keeps the nausea vomiting down. So reread these journal entries often, and it will help you modifying dose. It'll help you during your personal appraisal, which is a little bit later. Last thing on journaling, since you're all journaling because you want to be successful, go to microdosingpsychedelics.com. Please go to microdosingpsychedelics.com. Start a profile and carry all of your journal entries to there. This is Dr. Fatima's group in California. They are taking all of these anonymous journal entries. This is anecdotal evidence. This is what gets scientists interested in trends to fund research. Please help everyone out during this renaissance. Note your journal entries there. They analyze patterns, and it just pushes research. So I can't emphasize that enough. All right, I need a brief thing of water. That'll be $5. Joke grenade, that'll go off in 5 seconds. Now, the next couple I want to talk about are external assistant path stones for you. First off, it's very important is the support system. I don't want you microdosing alone. Just like in macrodoses, it's never a good idea, especially if you're microdosing for mental health, to microdose alone. Have a support system. And what do I mean by like that? A lot of times I get asked, do I need a guide or can I do this without a guide? Now, I kind of wrote this in the hopes that it could be kind of quasi-substitute for a guide. You don't necessarily need a guided shaman like you do in a macrodose setting. Or medicine person, okay? Whatever your entheogenic person. You don't necessarily need it all the time, but I lean towards the voice of experience, and especially those veteran microdosers who can give you pointers and bounce ideas off of. Close friends. Close friends who know you're going into this microdose experience, disclose to them, they're very close to you. So you can tell them how you feel honestly and truthfully, and they can back and say, oh, okay, well, what do you feel about that? Blah, 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 okay? So life partners make it really good. Use the stand so that the mic stops crackling. The mic's crackling? Yeah. I can try. I can try. Thank you so much. All right, we'll try this. Thank you. Okay, great. All right. So a close friend. I forgot to mention with close friends that like a microdosing buddy. Say you have a friend who's also interested. What is it? This one? Let it go and I'll tell you. Okay, it's sliding. Get a microdosing buddy, somebody else who wants to experience microdosing with you. And you can bounce off each other, okay? I like to encourage everybody to surround yourself with a positive friend circle. Being a light bearer and light bringer to people, I kind of disassociate myself from people who are constantly negative. There is something different when you're venting among friends, but there are people that you know that are just inherently negative people. Stay away from them. Incorporate a positive light circle. A lot of people ask, well, should I have a counselor or my therapist in my close friend support system? And I kind of say no. And the only reason I say no is I would rather see, especially if you're microdosing for mental health, I'd rather have you actually have a counselor or therapist who is not your friend. The importance of a counselor therapist is they're there to give you a neutral observer feedback. They are not your friend. Your friends love you and want what's best for you, but sometimes they sugarcoat shit, right? So a counselor therapist, especially for mental treatment, I encourage to have, just so they can be a neutral, kind of more Western medicine-y-ish type attitude. They're just there to observe, say, I'm seeing these trends in your behavior, and let's talk about that. That's what they're there for, to bounce it off you as a neutral person. But I don't recommend you go immediately into your counselor and say, hey, I'm going to do microdosing. Probe first, and it's very easy. I've been reading this article about microdosing. I'm really, really interested to try microdosing for treating XYZ. How do you feel about that? Do you know anything about microdosing? Leave it as an open-ended question. Shut up, let them answer. And then follow your gut on their response. If you get a hostile vibe, don't share. If they're open to it, maybe discuss it, and I'm really thinking about doing it. Keep probing, you'll get there. If you get a great counselor, they're going to do what's best for you. And if they see positivity, they're going to tell you so. They're going to affirm that. So I briefly talked about this before as the next path stone on this guided path is personal appraisal. Now, one of the things they talk about often with fungus and setting up your dosing schedule is have a 10-set cycle. So after 10, like my baseline fungal microdosing regimen is 5 days on, 2 days off. It's a nice week for working people. I always recommend not the first day to do it at work, but like it's a nice long 2.5 months is a 10 set. And so at 2.5 months, do some personal appraisal. But not only then, personal appraisal should be active and ongoing. Every day you should be sitting down with yourself in your journal entry before you write your journal. Just think about your day and appraise your personal review. How did you react to crises? How are you feeling physically? Do you feel better? Do you feel worse? Personal appraisal, active, ongoing. So the importance of personal appraisal, especially at these 10-dose cycles, is you can reevaluate your dosage. You can raise it up or down. A lot of people have their own personal reactions to fungus. Some taper up, some taper way down. It's personal, so it takes a couple dosing cycles to get it right for you. And that works with a lot of people on different substances on a microdose level. I've had people who cannot microdose mescaline or any of the phenylethylamines because they feel them at the smallest level. It's ridiculous, but great. But the other thing you can reevaluate is your timetable. Some people start at that 5-day dose on, 2-day off for fungus and find it's too short. So I have dosing schedules all the way out to 8 days on, 3 days off. And you start out at a minimal dose, boost it midweek, break, minimal dose, boost it. I highly recommend Paul Stamets, his lion's mane and niacin stacking. If you're going to be microdosing fungus, look into it. It's amazing. It's all about the receptors in your brain. And he's got figured out how to reset, make them work really good. So another thing with personal appraisal, can you add other microdosing? Yes. Like I was microdosing LSD and fungus for a long time, and I started micro or mini dosing DMT. It's amazing. I have a little vape cartridge with some liquid DMT and a nice vegetable glycerin, and I like it much more than microdosing LSD, especially for performances like this. LSD is 12 hours, no matter micro or macro, right? So like if I microdose LSD to be on at 4:20, the most ironical start time ever, I would have had to take it like 2:20, and that would mean I am up dawn, basically. You know, DMT, I can take a little bit before the presentation. I will neither confirm nor deny this happened. I confirm it. Fuck it. But it comes on, and right about now is when it's starting to taper, but I'm most of the way through my performance, and my mental state is right where I want it to be. I am first person present, I'm in my most elevated intellectual state, and I'm sharing information. So I don't have to worry about the long taper at the end of an LSD microdose experience. So can you add others? Can you macrodose? Yes, absolutely. I recommend people take about a week off before you macrodose. And by week off, I mean no microdosing and no 5-HTP, very limited flushing to give yourself the best experience possible. Okay. So next, final pillar on my path here is one I'm hearing a lot more of, and I'm very grateful to that. About 2 years ago, intention was really starting to be talked about, and now this one, integration. Integration. You can get all the way to the edge of the cliff and think you can fly, but without Wile E. Coyote's integration, you're going to find out gravity's real and sink, okay? It's kind of an analogy. So what do I mean by integration? Integration is the constant. Remember I told you the personal appraisal is active and ongoing. Well, what you do is you take all of that experience, all your conversations with your support system, all of your journals, which are conversations with yourself, really. Take all of that information, figure out your dosing schedule, all of that. Take all of the information you gathered, all that data points, and roll it up into a package that you could integrate into yourself to continue forward from that moment. Do you want to continue microdosing? Yes or no? Okay. So how are you going to integrate the experience? Well, it's, ironically, if you know what Jeet Kune Do is, Bruce Lee's amazing system, it's kind of similar. You want to incorporate all of the positive elements that you're getting out of microdosing. You want to discard negative, and you want to treat it as a holistic process. You are changing fundamentally who you are in here, but it affects the system as a whole. And Aya is really good about showing you that your body is messed up in this way, and if you just did this, it would be better. So microdosing is kind of like training your system to operate in a much more functional way. There's a drop-off of LSD at around 7-8 months, and it's almost like your brain is trained better, and you kind of don't need it as much. So treat it as a holistic, your body, your mind, your witness, your mind first, body second, okay? Take that, roll up into a good package, and come out the other side of it with a positive evolution towards a positive self. How are we doing?
You're doing great.
Okay, time-wise. Stroke my ego. Oh, good Lord. Good. Okay, great. All right. That will allow me to expand on some things. All right. So I do have some closing statements, but in summary, what the path stones are, just one more time to run them through. Once you have your dosage of your molecule and what you're going to be doing and your dosing schedule, what do you do then? Well, then you need to start thinking about intention. What are you microdosing for? Get a real clear target on that. Set a goal, short-term, long-term, on what you want to get out of this microdosing experience. Intention is more of that free will. I want to go into this having an experience. Allow me to have an experience and allow it to unfold. Okay. Have a meditative practice, and there's so many kinds. I love to dance. I don't look it, but dang. Get me some good techno or house music. Speak to me. Okay. If house was a nation, I want to be president. Okay, I'm done. Have a support system. And the keys to support system, your close friends, your positive friend circle, veteran microdosers, people you can talk to, microdosing buddies, spouse, life partners, polycules, whatever you got going on. Admit to your friends that you're doing it. Be out loud and proud, and get some feedback from your friends. Okay, you should be journaling this whole experience, okay? Journal. I emphasize it so much because I found it really beneficial for myself. With social anxiety and interaction issues, I often find it hard to disclose a lot of what's going on inside the human, the mental chimp zoo. So, journaling for me became really cathartic. And it really helped me narrow down when I was feeling anxiety or when I was just feeling the fungus. Was I feeling socially awkward, or was it just that I'm really tired because the LSD microdosing is wearing off? So it really helped me analyze, and oh man, I got so good at identifying triggers just from journals. And the thing about triggers is often, most of the time, you don't know about them until after they happen. And then you're dealing with the aftermath, which is what do you do during a triggering process? And then you have to, again, integration. How do you move past it? So journaling helped me find all things like that. I do have a counselor. I have a therapist who works with me very well. I immediately had to bring them up to speed, rapid fire on what microdosing was, and they did acid in college, but that was about that was the congruity there between us. They were very open to it. They were very Portland in a way. They were very open to new things and oh, okay, well, tell me more. I'm not going to make a snap judgment. Tell me what you got, okay? And I'm kind of an autodidact, and you get me on stage, and I just right. I'll preach. Professor Stonyface is my nickname. So the therapist, I really want to emphasize that neutral observer. I've seen some people, and I've seen some close friends go down in flames in the worst way possible, just because the only support system they had was one or two people, and they didn't have a therapist, and they really needed it. They really did. So, severe mental illness can't be treated with microdosing alone. It's foolish to think that you're going to start a microdosing regimen and a month later be cured and be able to function without your meds. A lot of the medications you shouldn't be on anyway when you're on psychedelics, even at a microdose level. So you should be tapered off of those. But if you can't taper off and go off meds without becoming non-functional, then there's some work there that needs to be done. That's where your counselor or therapist can come in handy. Personal appraisal, active and ongoing. Look at yourself. Be truthful to yourself. Even if it's hurtful and ugly, be truthful to yourself. Don't lie to yourself. That's kind of what gets you in trouble in the first place. Your journal allows you to use your voice in an unadulterated, uncensored, unabridged way. Talk to yourself. Don't be degrading to yourself, but be brutally honest with yourself. Time? 5? 10? Good. Good. Integration. Your positive friend circle will be very helpful in integration, because integration is not necessarily an easy process. Like I said, it's rolling up all of this experience into a ball that you somehow put into yourself and make a new person out of yourself. And there's lots of analogies I've heard, like Play-Doh. Imagine you're taking a lump of good Play-Doh and putting it into, off color and making it better. And I've heard all sorts of analogies, but it's hard to really describe integration as a process, really, that isn't much more than a summary of things, excising negative, incorporating positive, think about your whole self and integrating and moving on. And it's a good way to think about it is, how do I exist as a person, my mental image of myself with this new information included? What does that look like? Okay? So, some final thoughts before I leave you. I zoomed through this, but it's okay. I am of the out loud and proud school of psychedelic use. That's not going to change. I run into a lot of stubbornness and people that are still ego-driven in psychedelics way too frequently. And they often are the more conservative, we must make it a research and science issue only. And, I don't agree. We don't agree. Okay? Out loud and proud. Why is this so important? We push research. We are the ones pushing research. We are the psychedelic cultural ground zero of North America. San Francisco, Portland, Vancouver, BC, Toronto. That's it. We are ahead of the curve. And we are the ones pulling the curve towards us. Okay? And what do I mean by that? Cultural acceptance. Okay, I was at the advent of cannabis legalization in this state. I've been a medical marijuana card holder for 19 years in this state. Okay, people are trying to equate the cannabis pathway to psychedelics. I don't agree there a little bit. That's minor issues. But we look how fast cannabis culture got accepted. Once a couple states did medical, now we're over half, and we're rapidly approaching over half for rec. So cultural acceptance is much shorter these days with the advent of internet and online lifestyle. So being out loud and proud instead of stodgy lab coats and research only, we use this stuff. You need people to go, yeah, this shit works. You need us to go where angels fear to tread, So cultural acceptance starts with us. And those of us who have knowledge, I was called to get up here and talk to people. That's how passionate I am about this. Okay? Without microdosing psychedelics, I would not be here today, and I'm just going to keep going. So hopefully you take this pathway as a suggestion. Don't take my word for it. Just because I'm up here telling you, don't take my word for it. Go home and research. Don't accept anything at face value. Not these days. Research. Commune. This is why psychedelic culture is needed. Places like this where we can share information inside a trusted friend space and inside of a trusted space, safe space. This is how we network and dialogue and get it accepted culturally. So, I'm Hawkeye. That's my microdosing little thing. Thank you all so much for listening. Have a great day. I could probably take a limited number of questions and not overly complicated. How much time?
You have 3 minutes.
3 minutes! Okay, redhead.
Also, I keep hearing about how microdosing should have you getting something tolerance builds, and you don't find that to be an issue with microdosing therapy. That's just based off of you testing on your own self?
This is following a lot of research with Dr. Fadiman's group. Okay, there is a reason to let yourself break periods, and that is a reset.
Just real quick, and this is for everybody. You mentioned the stamina stack. Has anybody else in here done the stamina stack and niacin? Does anybody here break out in a rash when they do it? What is that? No, I know it's the niacin, but I'm saying why do our bodies suck that that's happening? What is everybody else that it does that?
Just niacin has that reaction. It flushes your skin and it goes to the joints. It's a natural part of niacin.
It pushes it out through your pores is the easiest vector. Yeah, it's related to the histamine reaction. He's correct. Yeah, lower the niacin. Lower the niacin. Oh, okay. So to further answer your question, break periods are needed because this is based on science, and this is one of the things I love and what I needed to learn. Why I needed to learn is, well, how does it work? Well, it's the serotonin receptor sites. So if you're dosing every day and activating those receptor sites, they need a break to reset. One of the reasons that LSD lasts so long is the receptor site latches on and keeps it in there. Well, sometimes they don't let go or their mechanism's mangled. So mostly the breaks are mostly to let your serotonin receptor sites recover. Yeah. Yeah, it's Fadiman's schedule. That's mostly for LSD and things. Dose, day 2 rest, afterglow, day 3 rest, dose again, day 4. It's the same break. Yeah. Let me quickly answer that, and then I got to get off. LSD is much more of a shotgun scattershot effect on many dopamine and serotonin receptor sites. Fungus is much more focused on the H2A. So less break needed on the H2A because you're only taxing that one. LSD taxes multiple. Okay? Thank you, everybody.